Thank you for joining me. We're in part three with Maureen Walton O'Brien. She's the author of The Good Darkness. This is all about women, recovery, restoration of wisdom, the wisdom of the women, the cosmos, everything coming in. Talking a lot about sacred geometry, the sacredness of the womb, womb recovery, and what she calls womb and blood mastery. So I'm just going to quickly show you guys where to get a hold of Maureen. She's going to dive right into her part three. It gets deeper and deeper and better as we've been going. So, and hopefully we'll have some really interesting stuff as well that you'll want to see down the road. Because one of those things, like I said, people have just been missing this very, very vital information. And if we can bring them to it, people to it, I think this is where we need to go. So, Maureen, I'm just going to screen share here for a second with so people can see your website. This is how to find Maureen, maureenwalton.com. So this is the very homepage, which I think is great. And is there anything people need to know? Obviously, there's a contact you button here. So what do we need to know about your site here and how to guide through this quickly?
Well, everything is there. Even the full meditation is there as an audio. So, and it actually is going to be, and that's an introduction, and
Okay,
it's actually going to be updated next month with new information. I have my web
excellent.
working on it now.
Awesome. And I'm just like totally fascinated. You also have an Instagram, so those people that are on the Instagram, they can get a hold of you there. But
Yeah.
these are some of the previous videos and stuff and talks that you've done as well, which I think is really, really important.
They're the
Um,
early ones, yes.
Earlier ones, it keeps getting better. Just like, as we get more information, you put new into it. And
Yes.
I know you've also got a how to get the books here. So whether you want to get it in hard copy or whatever, you've also got workshop books and stuff too, I see, right? And
I
ebooks and
have a,
meditation.
I have an audio coming up, and I've read personally the smaller book, and I've got it as an audio that will be coming up next month too.
Wow, awesome. Okay, so this is actually a lot of different things. People have been following you. You've run retreats. You've done a lot of amazing things. And I know you've also got the Instagram here too. So without further ado, and you've got a couple of videos and shorts I saw there as well. Maureen, talk to us then about what you want to talk to us about. What do you think we need to know that's so important that women have to come back to that 0 point, being sacred and getting reconnected themselves before they can help others?
Well, simply because to say that this is a very practical, physical thing where you're actually moving our real blood up through our body. So it's very real. It's not just philosophy. We're moving the physical blood. So that's what drew me. And, and it amazes me that the younger women that, um, we can actually test through them, us older ones, and actually see that they are not losing their blood anymore. Just a couple of days of spotting.
Right.
And again, these women already have a meditation background. You got to be a serious practitioner for this to work. And so the point we're at now is that with these women that started this a few years ago, let's begin to watch how they change, how they begin to awaken. So we haven't even arrived at that point yet where, what's happening with these women? How long will it take for them to begin to um, experience the actual change of having the cosmic energies
Hmm.
come into their heart and their brain? So, and the other thing that I'm sure that some of you people may be thinking is that how come I'm still so passionate about this and I'm 78? Obviously, I so-called menopause, perhaps, see, I didn't learn about this until I was 53 is when I started to study this. And how is it that I was so passionate about it? So I guess my only thought can be that um, because I'm from the world where I lost this precious elixir from 15 to 42, um, I was weakened, but in so-called menopause, maybe we begin to redirect again naturally.
Hmm.
And we do get wiser as we get older. Perhaps I started redirecting, and we all would be in that case,
Right.
as we get older. And maybe that's why this came to me. Nevertheless, I do feel guided and I'm being led with this. So whatever happened, it's happening to me at an elder age, you know. So that's still a mystery to me. But I'm just excited to hear from any women who have practiced, who've gotten the book, and of course these 2 or 3 women that have actually had success. One of them was doing it solo. Can you imagine if we were a group in a circle?
It came to me actually earlier when we were talking because I was thinking, like, a lot of women. I've had women in here, several, friends, right? We do what's called vaginal or yoni steaming, right? Again, to me, when you're actually thinking about the energy coming through and bringing a connection, to me, this is the best form of earthing or grounding that we could do, a reconnection, because those sacred particles from the plant with the water combined come up into the ethers. And that's why I saw so much change, not just for men and women, but I've actually done it for animals and children too. But one of the things is that reconnection. And I think we're actually changing because we're putting the energies or those minerals or vitamins or those sacred, elements back into the system that have been missing for so long because we've been so colonized. Like I said, there was something they call with Pottinger's cats, and Dr. Alexis Carroll also did some experiments too that we could go back to epigenetics. But what they found is it takes usually about 4 generations and you can wipe out that original customs, usages, laws. And look how many people have lost their language just from being put into schools. We don't all speak maybe, the Russian, the Cyrillic, whatever the mother tongue was, right? And we see this, throughout bands and reserves, which, is going to be interesting in a couple of years because I think it's in less than 3 years. Those bands and reserves turn back to basic municipalities. There was a time limit on the bands and the reserves as well before 2030. So a lot of people are unaware of that because those are not usually the hereditaries. Those are the people that have been, reconnected back or recolonized back. So that's why I'm finding what's very interesting when I've been with wise women as yourself and matriarchs and shamans and stuff like that, is that you're not going to see it in, the wide stream where we think it is, because a lot of people forget every one of us. It's irrelevant to the color of the skin. Even the medicine wheel was not 4 directions. It was to represent the chakras. It would be like, that's where they start talking about the dodecahedron and your sacred geometry and 12 different chakras, and the 13th being you, the women inside. So I'm finding it's very interesting that you've got a large part of the puzzle. And I really appreciate what you've done because you've gone to go meet with some of these people and been open to their teachings. And I think it's as we bring it back, I remember going to one of the bands of reserves and they kept talking, you got to hear about these chakras. I'm going, do you mean chakras? Right? I was talking to some of the Cree women, right? Again, potato, and how we do that. Is it hey you or Yahweh? I mean, there's such been a disparity of the language,
Yeah.
That's why I always laugh. Shaman, all these people want to be shamans. They think it's some North American Indian. I said, why don't you try Cyrillic and Siberian, Russian, Tartarian? It's a Tartarian word, right? Octarian, Tartarian. We talked about goodness and, what actually the whole art is, right? Darkness to me is the arc, like the arc, the arc, de even like French, right? So even the play on the words. But I love your book in here as I go through this, and for just a second, I was just going to take a look here and see what jumps out at you, because if people need to know the wide expanse and diversification you had, you've got a list just of diagrams. And when we went into diagrams, you guys, there's diagrams throughout the whole entire book here. Your ability to articulate the sacredness and the geometry of what women have within us, and not just the biofield, but you talked about your story with the womb technology coming through the Cuero Indians and the Andes and stuff, and finding your mission, that heart to womb. You talked about the quadrant, the nature of light, the Hyberian creation story, original creation stories. That's what you did. You've been spending years just studying creation stories to do with even the feminine aspect. And what I love here, the living land of the virgin birth, right? The lost feminine keys of, and with the life. Then you talked about global matriarchs, which I always thought, oh, that's interesting. What do they talk about matriarchs? I know I'm one of them, right? I'm the 13th grandmother, right? The insights of Dr. Heidi, you talked about in here, all the different, what's the difference between matriarchs and matriarchs, the forest in here. And then you talk about the magnetic darkness, your sacred geography, the cosmic soul. Any one of these could be a book on its own. That's what I'm saying that's why I'm encouraging people to go to your site and get these books. The Global Dark Lodge, the Blood Masteries, and the Redirection. So that's where you actually get into the nuts and bolts of doing meditation, right? And two separate systems. You talk about the womb and the heart energies and how to combine them. Forget the eagle and the condor. I think you've made a whole new version of creation stories. The Immaculate Conception, right? So all these things in here, and the Taurid and the sun and the earth, like everything cosmos in here. And then different current practitioner. And what's really important is people that have, had their oaths in here for you, recapping all these things, the global, and then the myths. This is huge.
I do have some complete stories in there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely in here. And then the complete meditation you give of what you've been passed down.
Right.
And so this is a sacred thing. And then you actually have got also here, and then you've got a whole list of all the diagrams. And then you've got a workbook as well. So I just want people to be aware of the in-depth complexity and sacredness that Maureen has brought into all of us as women and men, but for the entire planet here to do restoration.
It's the source. In other words, we have to start it in order for the men to be able to follow through, because they're kind of, as you know, going crazy right now because they're not listening to us. So as soon as we're the ones that have to start things right again, right? So.
Yeah. How do you see women beginning? I've seen such a tragedy in the last couple of years, the accumulation, right? Because I know as not only a holistic and natural nurse, but as a natural medical consultant, right? And doing lifestyle and coaching and that type of thing, is that women especially have been so disconnected. They don't know how their systems operate. They don't know how they run, just simple basics, not to take injections while you're even pregnant, and nor do we really need them. We've come into such a thing, and I'm hoping this will be the circle coming back, that it's going to be, what we've seen here. And it will be women like yourself that are holding a lot of these key elements. And to your credit, I mean, this is what people don't realize. When a lot of the other different tribes used to come to me, Cree, Nahiawaka, Blackuk, and Sanayak, and whoever, and Haida Gwaii, or, Apache. I've worked with lots in the States too, Apache, Choctaw, you name it, been there, done that. One of the things that I thought was really important, and I see so much had been lost in the area when I grew up. I arrived into Kamloops, which is, in here in the, Shuswaps and different areas now where I'm the Kootenays, but where you are is very important, because there is a whole thing about that virgin birth, I think it's quite close to you. Don't you live quite close to one of those sacred sites?
It's within a 15-mile radius of the virgin birth. Yeah. But I think it happened all over. I think it was quite, it wasn't that rare.
No, obviously not. But I think just that someone's still got a creation story there, right?
Is the peacemaker, the Wendat, they were Wendat women, but it's also called the Haudenosaunee and the Iroquois, but it's right here in the Eastern Woodlands and the Great Lakes. So it is, I guess, and they were the first ones that interacted with the Europeans coming over. And this is a whole other story that I won't go into, but according to them, that the first arrivals were overwhelmed by the good governance, and they incorporated some of it into the first USA governing. And there's actually a Jukonsase figure on top of one of the Parliament buildings in USA. So, does this fit into Tartary? I don't know, but the fact that in the beginning there was respect there in the first 100 years anyway.
Oh, I've seen a lot of that. Like a lot of people, it's funny talking to people as they think Americans, right? I said this was America's empire, is what they called it, like pre-Tartarian, not Turtle Island, right? That becomes the myth. Oh, it kind of looks like a turtle in this instance apart. And I went, it was actually called the America's empire. Everything was an empire. It's like Tartarian. It was like, how was it set up? Why were these different, star nations, clans, and tribes coming in? And they were led by women. They always were. And so
Yeah.
this has been, I think, one of the sacred thing, and that even like the Queen Elizabeth, she wasn't. She was technically people think their clan mother, but she actually wasn't an original clan mother, and she wasn't a, like a Tartarian. They didn't have the original bloodlines. They were usurpers. And so now when people, when you're talking about like the Five and Six Nations that and the Iroquois Confederacy and how even the idea of Canada, that's when I got into looking at treaty tribal law because it doesn't matter. The maritime, the Black's Law, the Bouvier, Admiralty, it doesn't matter. This common law and private law does not matter. It just becomes more and more distractions and how, they basically went and killed a lot of the, matriarchs. I know when the few ones that they had out east was, I think, Artie, I would say one, she had one them, but Artie Two Thumbs and stuff like that. In the different areas like the Mohawk, is it once she passed over probably about I think 6, 7, 8 years ago now. They didn't have anyone to step into her
I see.
her boots, right? And I was told there's only a few of us left, right? And I see how the governments are trying to usurp the women and the feminine, even the land. They want to give it to corporations like
Yeah.
bands and reserves. I said they don't own it. They're not hereditaries.
Oh, you
And
know what? Just redirect the blood. Just start with that,
yeah,
just stay imagining, visualizing, and using that geometry, that sacred geometry, and just physically start to move that blood and empower yourself.
would you give us just a kind of a brief thing? I liked in our part two when you talked a little bit. It was almost like a bit of a meditation. Could you give us just a brief, like couple minutes, just of how someone would start? A lot of people just don't know, but where can we get people just to start with a simple idea of meditation? Could you do that for us for just a minute or two? A short
Like
version.
just I just have to do the beginning aspect, I guess. We did part of it where we were out in the cosmos and we were getting familiar with the Tori systems around the sun, around the earth, and around us. And then we visualized that we also have a horizontal one connects to the ether. So I think the best first thing to introduce yourself is start getting familiar and sense these powerful cosmic ethers flowing by us all the time, right along the earth. Like, how deep does it go? I guess it depends on the energies, but maybe it's a few 100 feet, or maybe it's just 10 feet at places, but it's going under the ground too. But it's this powerful cosmic force that's not earthly, not contaminated, and no karma. So just imagine this, flowing naturally into your womb. And when it comes your time to where you think it's natural to let go of the blood that's full of this cosmic ether, just imagine, no, this is precious. I'm keeping this. This is precious. It's going to wake me up and help me gain wisdom and help me to help the men to slow down and follow us and listen to our advice. And maybe just starting with that, and then when you get comfortable with holding it and savoring it as something beautiful, then you can start to study the geometry of how we work our toroidal systems to lift that 0 point up.
It's funny, I got this thing, like going back to some of the sacred geometry and some of the different rites, and I think where the corruption came in through the churches and
Yeah.
through a lot of this, right? The whole heaven and hell stuff. But anyway, the chalice and stuff like that was always a form of basically what the vagina and the uterus was, the entire sacred womb and the Eucharist and stuff. But it was interesting how in a lot of those things, I think when they probably started corrupting a lot of the women or dumbing them down or through chemicalization and weaponization of what we're seeing with injections and stuff of the food system and the water right now is that, I mean, there were a lot of people that used to actually collect that womb blood off the virgins and, use it for youthing as well. And it was
That's
interesting.
they women at that time weren't losing it though.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was interesting how that was used. I mean, there's a whole thing about the body and blood of Christ, but it was again the Christos or the anointed ones. This isn't when they flipped everything back into the patriarchal system. It was always interesting because I said, even for scriptures, I said, where's all the matriarchs? You've only got two, but this does not make sense to me, right? And then when I started learning about the Book of the War of the Lords and all the stuff that there were books that the women had, and that they've been stored in, like that particular one, into the British Museum. So a lot of the original books here that were part of, as people think, scriptures, were actually stolen from the North American continent and put over into Britain and into Cairo University and to some of the Jewish congresses. So it took me a while to track down some of that because I thought, I want the information from the women, not just this whole thing about even Marian apparitions and the Magdalene lines and the ley lines and stuff like that. When I started seeing what they were actually doing, with that, I've always wanted to, and which we've done. I mean, whether people like it or not, we've done, as we know, live blood cell analysis, a lot of us. We've also done urine because that's a different form of energy as opposed to something fecal that's being let go as a discharge. But urine actually has it, but also the study of actually menstrual blood. So a lot of people, and unless you're really deep down this for a while, and if you looked at menstrual blood under a microscope and seen the sacred geometry within that, that's a whole nother study as well. Because
So you've seen yourself that it's very pure and high energy.
yeah, if you got there, and like I said, it's about raising vibration and frequency. We can't just say we can meditate, or like we talked earlier about using tuning forks, essential oils, alkalinity. I thought it was really interesting. You mentioned about the pH and the alkalinity of the womb, right?
Yeah,
And what's the first thing and they teach in medical school or in nursing or an OBGYN, right? For obstetrics and gynecology, right? Is it, oh, it should be acidic. Right? Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, there's pH, vaginal pH paper, right? People can measure their own vaginal pH.
Can I mention something here that I'm not sure, maybe you as a medical person might know, is at least at times anyway, it feels as if that cervix is protecting the cosmic energy within the womb from the outer world, which is the vagina. Like
Oh,
so the it's like a barrier that keeps that sacred space and doesn't flow through, and nothing gets in and nothing gets out.
yeah, it's very much, remember we were talking in part two a little bit about the blood-brain barrier, right? There is a protection always within those areas, right? This is why we're seeing so much of, the Playtex and the tampons and the maxi pad. All these have got graphene like that were put into, and toxins and bleaches and genetically modifying. And now we're seeing that within the women, right, is the transgenderization and the SOJ stuff, which is absolutely ridiculous. But when you actually get into it, this has been, masculizing and actually defeminizing women. But it's actually altering the genetic code. People don't realize when they talk about gender benders or hormone disruptors or phytoestrogens, they're actually putting things in there like a computer program that's like a virus. And so you're just going to keep getting a virus program. Or now we see, that's why we saw such a change. I could not get over when I first started nursing and going into, neonatal and, this. Neonatals were actually part of an ICU that we were ICU nurses, right? Intensive care. And depending on the size, right, we had incubators and open care beds in an intensive cares. Then we went to neonatal units, and now we've got entire maternal child hospitals because they have been literally destroying the integrity of the women's mitochondrial DNA. And we are seeing the hybridization as well, with that. But that is because it strictly comes down to what your number one point is that women need to love themselves. What we put into ourselves, whether it's food, water, energy, what we're watching on TV, the friends we surround ourselves with, I mean, if you can't have that in such a pure and intent, or a lot of people defiling their bodies too. I mean, there are many ways through addictions, through chemicalization. A lot of people don't realize even some of the different things we're seeing with the tattoos. Those are all chemicalization with liquid graphene that is now going into the lymphatics and causing women breast cancer, right?
Mm,
So all
mm.
those, it just at every sort of sub level, but that womb has got a protective, just every area's got a protective zone to it. And it's interesting when we get into the color spectrum, we start looking, where is the perineum? I always looked at from an electrical point of view, because that's that electrical part of me, is that, coming up the legs when we bring meditation, or we say we're bringing them up the energy and bringing them into the root chakra, into the perineum, into the vaginal, into the womb area, and getting creative. So we're going through that. That's 55 and 55 hertz, which comes to 110 right at the vagina. And what do we see with the electrical, how they've tried to mimic it, 60 hertz and 110 and 220. So it's interesting how they try and basically biohack the women in our biofields and literally our sacredness. And then when you get up into that, and that triple warmer goes up. But when I started doing women for what you call sexual abuse, ritual abuse and stuff like that, right? Those are very integral nodal points, because I invented a whole technology and protocols and therapies for women that have been not only just injected and shedding, but for the actual, what we're seeing with what's called MK Ultra and stuff, but usurping the women, right,
Mhm.
is damaging the little children, especially when they're so young and so fragile in that innocent point, to kind of loose harvest off the innocence and the integrity of those, boys and girls. But in there, what's amazing is that you could see a lot of these points where they have done that are actually acupuncture points, or let's say the root chakra, we're spending to the infrared spectrum. People always go, I don't get this, like, it's this woo-woo stuff. I said, no, a chakra is wheel of light. The wheel of light is where you just showed on your diagram, right? You've got the venous system and the arterial system, and they come together in the center, like a capillary point, like an explosion point. To me, that's the Trinity. There's a Trinity in each section, including in the womb, you know? So I think if we don't have that self-love, where are we going to go? That's why I think bringing back, like, what we call it, the red tent, or the dark lodge, or the black lodge, or the moon lodge, or whatever we want to call it, those sacred teachings have to be brought back, and I can even see in the new age sort of thing right now that, I call it the Lululemon of let's go to a sweat lodge, or, put a few feathers and bells and stuff. They really don't have that sacred, information that you've brought. That's why I think a lot of this has got to be brought forward. And law of attraction, the women that want this, they'll find us.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting parallel that I did retreats in the teens, and it was just like you were saying, it was like a tourist thing. It was entertainment, and I was getting frustrated, and that's when I wrote the books. And since I wrote the books, only women who have read it and are serious and are ready are coming to me now, and it's like
It
so
is.
much,
It,
make more progress.
it's got to be like, I remember when I, used to go and I meet with, these gurus and masters and matriarchs and stuff like that. It was the same thing. Like even Santos Bonacci, if you didn't watch all 40 of his videos, you didn't get a chance to even speak with him for 5 minutes. But I think there is something about putting in the time, the energy. It's one thing to just, and people want to come in and go, well, I want to know what you know, or I want to know how you did this, or how do you go arrest the queen, or how do you get sovereign, or what's the sovereign savage, like I am. It means to be under the reign of the matriarchs. It doesn't mean that you're an individual and you got the same. No, no, no. There's national law and clan law and tribal law, right? And the rest doesn't matter in my world. But, in here, I think it's so amazing here. I'm interested here. You're talking here about acknowledging these descending and horizontal forces here, and how other energies or off energies cannot enter the womb. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you meant by that?
Well, just because the ethers are so powerful and the womb is magnetic. So um,
What
it's
would be
just,
an off energy to you? I'm just curious. What did you mean by that?
well, something other than
Gotcha.
divine,
Okay. Okay.
other than divine, I guess. It seems to be just a pure space.
Yeah. Yeah. What,
Because how else could a baby form, a pure baby form there? And it's not just that's not the only thing that happens. We can do other things with that pure energy, and that's to bring ourselves to enlightenment.
so I'm curious because you've been, like you said, you started this kind of more in the 50s or whatever, in your 50s, and now you're in your 80s. And if you were to, like, let's say you do another attachment or book two or book three or whatever, however you're going to do it, or another, work book to this or whatever, what do you see as the additions? Like, what have you even come to learn in the last or formulated? Like, what would you add in now that was not in the book?
Well, I'm looking forward to getting reports back from the women who have been redirecting now for up to maybe 6 months. Like,
Okay.
how are you changing? And I'm going to be writing about that. How are they changing? How do they see themselves getting stronger and wiser and ready to take on what's going on in the world? It's so amazing that it came at this time, right?
Yeah, there's such a thing about having synchronicity or having everything in divine timing, right? You
Yeah.
know, I think there's a reason why that things get released. I thought it was interesting in our part two when you talked a little bit about the connections to, you had someone in that peacemaker area in there, but there's a guy that's making like a UFO, but basically 0 point technology. So we shouldn't call them UFOs because things are being raised, but how it's really copying the energy and the 0 point and the warp speed, because we were just like warp speed up, or to that black hole. We were just there. We could go, we could astral travel, we could do whatever. And I think
Yeah.
that's an important thing, that almost
I,
everything I see is a poor facsimile of what we have within us.
yes.
And it's kind of interesting. I always laughed, even when we talked about Robert Morningstar and stuff like that. A lot of the people in there, they talked about how basically most people, and I don't get how they don't know this, but men are basically women in the womb. Like the first little while in gestation, we actually all start off as actually female, as
What
women.
they have wings? They don't have wings.
They start off genetically, and there's a polarization later. I should send it to you. So a lot of people, that's why it's kind of funny, right? Is how the genetics split off, how when you had an XX or XY and how that happened, but
They
how
were.
embryology, yeah, start off in there. And
Can
so,
I, oh, sorry, did you finish that
yep,
sentence?
yep.
I just remembered something that I forgot. And when I was talking about we were talking about the UFO. The reason I brought that up, it's related to the Peacemaker group, because when the Dagonawida grew up, he built a stone boat. Now, the stone boat and the UFO have a lot in common. I mean, the stone boat is like the dolmens that are all over the world.
Yeah,
And those places were, they held the energy inside was like a womb space. So
absolutely.
there's a real connection there between the stone boat that he built after learning from his mother's, who self-conceived him. I mean, that's a story that needs to be explored more.
You
And the
know,
fact the little UFO was built just here too, which is like a stone boat.
well, again, when they talked about, what was the ark, we always think Noah's Ark, right? But they talk that a lot of these arcs are actually space arcs or Arcturian ships, arcs,
Right? Okay.
Arcturian ships in there that are actually, most of them are in the water, not on land. But it's interesting when you look at the Hill Cumorah, you look at the Sacred Kin domains that in Anastasia they talk about, and what I have again, which is Meredith Quinn's teachings, which is from his grandma that was one of the, as they think they were Palladians, right? But the Dakota, from the Dakota ET, in other words, as we got Arcturus and Bootes and Camelpodaris and the Palladians that they talk about from Dakota. And these are the Dakota teachings that he got, Meredith Quinn, which is what we call tribal laws. These there to me are the galactic laws. And it's interesting that his grandmother taught him. And a lot of this stuff is coming forward because all
I
this stuff,
listened to that.
yeah, the matriarchs, there is like roughly about 1,500 pages in here. And there's about 200 facsimiles as well. So when you start talking about what this technology is in pole shift, which I think is really interesting because it accumulates to the pole shift right now. This is all their information coming into, as we think, the processional change, which is what we're seeing happen right now. Not only the earth changes, whether they're, somewhat human or military, whatever directed, even when you talked about the earth charging, as we're getting that energy coming through the corneal mass ejections, the earth is literally receiving microwave and plasma. And right now we can see through that it's whiting out. Or the other day we had a blue streak, and it's not just a little thing. It's sitting here holding for like 7-8 hours. It is literally changing the earth, and we know the earth is now charged up and electrified.
Is this coming through the cosmic energies from?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so a lot of people are even noticing they're outside, they're burning more, their energies are off. It's affecting again, which is going to be affecting shedding. It's going to affect transmission. It's going to affect women's menstrual cycles as well.
Hopefully it will help us to redirect.
Well, I'm thinking this is actually, as we talked about this is where we're going, I think, back to that, because, a lot of that stuff, like I said, we always assume, these towers are coming this way. It's actually, 6G comes up, it's inside you. And so I love Sabrina Wallace talking about everything is underneath, inside already. It's just being activated, right? So whether it's, and the whole thing is not to have anything, as you talked about, the purity of women, purity of the food, the water, is to not to have anything semi-synthetic, artificial, or even pharmaceutical. Because that again, another gateway is the pineal gland or the third eye. And I think a lot of this, when I looked at doing, whether it was chakras or meditation, using food, using juicing, using the colors, in there, it's interesting that what would come out would actually be, the red blood, right? As we start going back into what crystals, what colors, all sorts of things are, tuning forks, all into there. That's why everyone's into the infrared light and stuff now these days too, right? Is trying to get that restoration back, because I think we've been so fragmented. So, what, and again, you told me you hold retreats every year and that you're full this year, which is good. Congratulations. It's not about bringing in 300-400 people. It's about just getting a few people and getting the right cohesiveness of the group. So what have you learned, over this time, like doing the retreats? I'm sure it would be just an incredible thing. And we've got about a minute left. So I just want to say thank you for those and holding the retreats. I have someone, I think a friend of mine is going to be flying in possibly. Yes, I would love to join, but my vehicle in the tranny just blew. I'm not going anywhere for a while. So, but what I want to say is thank you for that invitation. And how do we again get a hold of you, Maureen? Where's the best way to get a hold of you?
My website, thegooddarkness.com, is also called, and I'm open to just email is fine. And I want to answer your question there that my next step, I think, is that what I'm wanting to do now with these mini retreats is to train women to open their own dark lodge.
Right. And so anything, if this sounds exciting to you, about the different blood masteries, about getting these roundtables, massive amounts of workshops, videos, anything about Maureen's background, all of her murals, anything in here, and then you've got just a wealth of information. So just scroll down to the bottom and all these different books and ebooks and stuff. There's a version and something exciting for everyone. Thank you again, Maureen, for joining me. Karenann Lipstick MacDonald. Have a great and exciting time, and we'll look forward to maybe next month, a part 4, who knows? After maybe your retreat has happened, we'll see.
Yes, I'll let you know all about it.
Okay. And how the women are doing and mastering their wounds in the blood. Let's talk about redirection and